peacefully, patriotically, cordially, and at least give the attempt or the perception that we're trying to keep folks in within their discretionary authority and not beyond. Okay? Now, having said that, you put this other camera here. Having said that, I'm going to say this. During our meeting yesterday, let me put the camera here a little bit better. During our meeting yesterday, I asked him a few questions. I asked him, sir, is it possible that you would consider making a statement that would make us confident that your buddy Paul Ryan's $787 million quote unquote settlement to, from faux news to deviant voting systems? Some people pronounce it Fox News, other people pronounce it Dominion voting systems. The bottom line of the question was, please convince the American public that that $787 million bribe, settlement, was not something more nefarious than a settlement, such as, hey, here's $787 million, Company B. Why don't you create the adjudicative outcome of our choosing? And on the back end of that, we're going to make sure that the Republican parties within these various states that you run the elections in pass some sort of a rule where the adjudicative outcome in your states that the machines produce, there will be no mechanism to appeal it. So there would be legal top cover for an adjudicative outcome that is not commensurate with the will of the people. See how the bait and switch could potentially take place? And I know it's a long shot. People say it's a stretch that this is a possibility. But when I asked him that question, can you please kind of indicate that that's not going to take place or that is not occurring? His response was, Ivan, do you believe in capitalism? And I said, that's a rhetorical question. Yes. But when he said it, amidst me asking that question, two, says a lot, I think. My interpretation of the response is, do you believe in capitalism, is if one private organization known as the RNC, right, or I should say faux news, let me back up. If one organization known as faux news, private business, right, offers up a $787 million distribution to another private company known as, pronounced deviant voting systems. Some people still pronounce it Dominion voting systems. And that second company runs the elections in 28 states. And also the software from that company is utilized by another company known as LHS that runs elections in all of New England, 6 of those states. And that second company is, by the way, the first company headquartered in Colorado. And I think up until last year, the president of the Secretaries of State was the Secretary of State of Colorado. Anyway, just something to chew on there. And then in New Hampshire, you have Governor Chris Sununu, who has publicly stated he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that there will be an adjudicative outcome of his choosing. Well, he has an outsized influence, considering that company LHS, when you do a deep dive on it, not only is it using the same software as deviant voting systems that received $787 million from Fox, another private company, but the private company LHS that has a lot of, that the governor of New Hampshire has a lot of influence over, considering his father, John Sununu, was the one that allowed the initial contract back in 1973 for them to be a temporary company to run elections in New Hampshire. You can kind of start to see where potential nefarious activity could take place. Now, I'm not saying that it will. I'm just making sure that you are aware of the potential most dangerous course of action that could take place to essentially minimize and divert the outcome of an election from what the will of the people is, right? So we could potentially start to deviate from the consent of the governed, if you will. So let me kind of wrap that up real quick. So what could potentially take place based on the response that I got from Robin Moss? Private company A gives almost $800 to private company B. Well, what do they get in return? It'd be nice to know and to publicize that settlement agreement, which is known as a contract, as a synonym. Is it possible that some of the stipulations of that contract were, hey, the following individuals are no longer going to be on our network because they promote some thoughts and ideas that are not congruent with Paul Ryan and Rupert Murdoch. And so we have to release them. The biggest name that you're aware of, obviously, is Tucker. And then you have Dan Bongino. So they released those two. Another component potentially of that settlement agreement is, why don't you create an adjudicative outcome of our collective choosing, but only in the primary? So in addition to the indictments that you're seeing being promulgated throughout the various states to ensure that basically the only guy that's going to be able to go after the same 5 individuals that did the censorship industrial complex over the last few years, convincing everyone into accepting the emergency use authorized products, were the same 5 individuals that went ahead and illegally defrauded the FISA court in order to spy on a Navy veteran, Carter Page. Okay? So they cannot allow that individual to take power because they're going to be in a very big predicament, to say it diplomatically. So then potentially this is what could be happening in order to conduct the electoral deviation from the elector's choice. So that was one question. The other thing he talked about was he asked he basically said, I primary opponent. And he said he couldn't afford another $1 million primary. And he's referring to his primary race with Adam Steen in Wisconsin's 63rd district. And as you know, if you've been following my work, I basically said that had the endorsement for Steen come up to a week prior to the early voting, there's no way that Robin Vos would have won that election. Not even close. But because the endorsement came in the middle, about halfway through the early voting process, and the amount of money that was spent, and that's just if the election, assuming the election was ran completely clean, that component there was one of the big reasons why Robin Vos was able to eke out a victory and then subsequently become the president once again of the National Conference of State Legislatures. So, do you think that there's going to be retribution from him from his position of influence against a particular candidate that's running for president next year? I would think so. But I pleaded with him I get dirty politics, and that's fine. I take no issue with that. But once you go beyond the legal authorities that you have and start to chip away and destroy our constitutional principles and our order, that's when kind of all bets kind of go off of the table. And that's when it's going to be difficult for him to get reelected next year. So depending on what he does over the next year will really indicate how we react accordingly. So those are probably the 2 primary things that happen. And in my conversation with Mr. Vos, there's some other things. I published it on my Twitter. So if you want to follow my Twitter premium, I do indicate some things kind of behind the scenes before I end up eventually publishing them on Twitter. So if you want to subscribe, go ahead and subscribe to my Twitter. Also, on my Substack, I'll be indicating some things prior to me pushing them out to the broader public, just so that I can get some interaction from the closer supporters, get some feedback, ideas in order to improve the plan or the content that I push out. Now, that's about the halfway point of the show today. The second part I want to talk about is, before we get to the second part, the National Conference of State Legislatures keynote speaker is Mike Pence. So that should let you know kind of where this organization stands, along with Robin Vos being the president. I did ask a question of this in one of the breakout sessions of the Secretary of State of Tennessee, and I asked him, Give me some. What are the downsides of going to paper ballot in person, 1 day voter ID voting? Considering that, oh, I don't know, Arizona can't do it on the machines in 1 day. They have to take several months in order to conduct their election. Number two, considering that $787 million bribe, how do we restore confidence in our election system, considering that and AI increasing its capability in order to, at scale, manipulate data and results of machine activity? And his bottom line answer was, well, we need to provide early voting and this and that. And he didn't really address the machine issue, which leads me to believe that he wants those machines, and it's probably because money flows with the contracts that are doled out in order to be able to have machines in the voting process. Now, having said that, I want to play a fairly long, quick clip, and that's going to be the whole show. And it's the interview by Glenn Beck with Tarek Johnson that Mr. Producer is going to air, and I'm going to watch it with you for the first time. Tomorrow we'll discuss the ramifications of this interview. So, Mr. Producer, Tarek Johnson, the U.S. Capitol Police whistleblower, is going to make the case on Glenn Beck's show that Yogananda Pittman was the one that essentially conducted the theft.
What didn't you say? Basically, what I did was I just gave some of the facts, and I was hoping that those facts would lead to a thorough investigation into Yogananda Pittman's actions before, during, and after January 6th, and unfortunately, that did not happen.
So you're talking about the same person that the police chief is talking about there?
Absolutely.
And what exactly was her role?
She was in charge of intel. And when I say she was in charge of intel, she was in charge of the intelligence on January 6th and anybody that worked in the intelligence division. She was in charge of it all. And her job was to get that information, and she was supposed to give that to, at the very least, 2 people. She was supposed to give that information to Stephen Sund, and she was supposed to give that information to Chad Thomas. He is a former assistant chief of the Capitol Police, and his role on the day was he was in charge of operations, which had been the bureau in charge of getting the officers ready for what they were going to face on January 6th, and she did not do that.
So when we found out that the FBI knew about this, the Justice Department knew about this, Nancy Pelosi knew about this in advance, we can't necessarily blame the police for not knowing it because it would have only come through her.
Now, if you let me walk you through, I'm going to need a couple of minutes to walk through this. Now, I've been trying to get the entire country to see Yogananda Pittman's significance and what occurred on January 6th. And it's almost the same as the few people that were trying to explain to other people that the world was actually round and not flat. So this is what I'm trying to get the country to see, that the world is round and not flat. Now, a lot of people, they want to focus on Nancy Pelosi, but you can talk about Nancy Pelosi, you can talk about Joe Biden. Neither one of those people could have occurred or could have made January 6th happen. The only way January 6th can happen, you would have to get the consent and permission from Yogananda Pittman. She is that pivotal. Now, let me explain to you why. And I'm going to do it, I'm going to use an analogy to break it down and make it a little bit more easy.
Okay.
If you want to follow me.
Yeah, I am.
Let me know whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. I got a pencil ready to go.
Okay. So let's say that you have a grocery store. And that grocery store, you have 3 different heads that work in the grocery store. You have the overall manager. You have the operations manager. This person would be in charge of like the grocery store employees, security around the grocery store, and you would have the loss prevention manager. That person obviously would be in charge of any thefts that occurred, of things that would be in the store. Okay. So let's say that I'm gonna give these people names, and I'm just gonna just make names up randomly.
Okay.
Let's say the loss prevention manager was, let's just say, Pittman. Let's say that the operations manager, let's give him the name of Thomas. And let's call the overall manager, let's call him, let me think of a good name. Let's call him Son.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, Son is getting information. And there's information out there in the community that the store is going to get robbed of all of the Twinkies, all of the steaks, the lamb chops, everything. Somebody's going to come in there and they're going to take all the lamb chops. So now you're going to go to the loss prevention manager and you're going to ask that manager, hey, what are you getting? And the loss prevention manager is saying, listen, I'm not getting anything, right? So now, Son, who is the store manager, he has to go get assistance from the local police department. He says, hey guys, I need some assistance. I need some patrols. I have a security guy, the guy with the white car with the orange overhead over top of that, who drives around the store at night, but I need more than that. I need police officers that are going to be doing around the clock drive-bys by my store. And the police chief of the local department says, Mr. Son, I understand what you want. He says, but what intelligence are you getting? He says, well, I'm getting this, and this. And the police chief says, sir, I'm sorry, sir, the intelligence doesn't support it. So now let's say that the loss prevention person, that's the name I gave to Pittman, has a report that says, well, there's going to be a guy coming to the store around 8 o'clock in the morning. He's going to be bringing four of those big giant trucks that they normally deliver food in. They're going to break into the store with about 10 guys, and they're going to take all the food out. So now she has this report, but she either sits on this report or she downplays the report to the chief. So to the store manager. So the store manager can't get the resources from the police department because the intelligence doesn't support it. That's what happened on January 6th. And to explain to you the significance of Yogananda Pittman. So let's say that for argument's sake, and I'm not saying that this is the case, but Pelosi wanted this to happen. Let's say Biden wanted this to happen. And they called Yogananda Pittman and they said, listen, I'm going to order you not to give Chief Son any information related to January 6th. You're not going to give him any information that would support the National Guard. You're going to downplay anything that's major because we need something to happen on January 6th. And I'm not saying either one of them did that. I'm just saying that I've heard in the atmosphere that I hear Nancy Pelosi's name a lot. But now, I know the position of the Speaker of the House and the line of succession that she's in to the presidency. She's second in line. If something happens to the vice president and the president, she would then become president. So she's a very powerful person. But understand this, even though she's powerful in her own arena, Yogananda Pittman was the most powerful person in her own arena. So Pittman couldn't just call her and say, don't give any information to Chief Son, because she could say, absolutely not. I'm going to give Chief Son everything he needs and to do a good job and make sure that the Capitol is adequately prepared on January 6th. Nobody can make Yogananda Pittman not do that. So this is what I haven't said, and I'm going to have to say it now. Now, because I just try to give the facts, but sometimes you have to, because then when you go off and you tell people what you think, then they try to call you a conspiracy theorist. But
right.
But sometimes you have to tell people what you think, and then let them make a decision if they believe is valid or not. So obviously, it was, to me in my position, something or somebody made Yogananda Pittman feel that if she sat on or either downplayed the intelligence given to Chief Son about January 6th, and something were to happen, Chief Son would take full responsibility for it, which he would because he is the actual chief of police. And then Yogananda Pittman would become the chief. That's what I believe would occur on January 6th.
Coup.
And if you look at the report, now, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's 21 TD 159, and it basically laid out what was going to occur on January 6th. And even if you could try to make the argument, when you go back to the store, well, you could say the intelligence said it was going to be 4 trucks that the person brought when they broke in and they were going to take everything. But this person only brought 3 trucks and he took 70% of what was available in the store. So you're going to try to downplay it to make it seem like you didn't have the intelligence when you actually did have the intelligence. So I say all that to say, January 6th cannot happen without her permission. It cannot. It's impossible. She is the alpha and omega of what occurred on January 6th, and the world needs to know that. No one can stop Yogananda Pittman from sending he needed to get the support he needed from the National Guard. She can sit on it, she can downplay it, and that's what I believe she did on January 6th, at the very least, leading up to January 6th.
And not that you're saying this at all, and nor am I, because I don't have any facts. I just have indications that she was rewarded with a job in Nancy Pelosi's district, a very high-level job. She became the Capitol Police chief. It was her failure. She was promoted, and then she was allowed to take this job while still getting benefits from Capitol Police, which is against the rules. Somebody had to make that happen, and it may have been Nancy Pelosi, but somebody made that happen. So that looks very suspicious as well, correct?
100%. But let me even go back, even before that. Let's go back before she left the department. Well, she didn't really leave the department until June, but Manger told everybody, and that's J. Thomas Manger, who's the current chief of the Capitol Police. He told everybody, I think it was called we put out like upfront, and that's like basically an announcement to the department that any news, and the news that he gave was that she was leaving the department back in February. I think he put that out in November. But anyway, 2022. But anyway, let's go back. So Yogananda Pittman was the chief on January the 8th. She was made acting chief on January the 8th after her chief's son was fired. And she was the chief, acting chief, until I believe it was July 23rd. And then Manger took over on July 24th of 2021. Yep. So she was the acting chief for from that time, from January to July. January 8th. So when Manger takes over, one of his first actions is when he took over as the chief from Yogananda Pittman. Do you know what he did? Okay, he put Yogananda Pittman back in charge of intelligence. Now, why do you do that? Why would he do something like that? He did it to send a message to any officer that was going to try to speak against Yogananda Pittman, to let them know that even though she messed up, because everybody in the world knows she messed up, that it doesn't matter what she did. This is Yogananda Pittman. She's going to be your boss again. So the people who, in the intel who went and reported her, she became their boss again. So what do you think that the people, that the whistleblowers are thinking when you put her back in charge of them? That's why she did it.
There you have it, folks. There you have it. Basically, Tarek Johnson making the case for, let me read it. You just listened to U.S. Capitol Police whistleblower Lieutenant Tarek Johnson on Glenn Beck exposing Yogananda Pittman, head of IICD, as the J6 Pelosi Fedsurrection parliamentary coup warlord. And that is confirmed by former U.S. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund. You're going to get more of this as Barry Loudermilk, head of the Oversight Subcommittee, Committee on House Administration, calls in to testify the General Counsel at U.S. Capitol Police, Thomas Tobias, along with the J. Thomas Manger, once again, who is the Chief of Capitol Police. With that, folks, that is breaking, massive. We're getting close to exposing the entire true story of that parliamentary coup on January 6th. With that, Raiklin Report out.